Go ahead and stand to your feet when you get there. Matthew 16:24. All right, Matthew 16:24. The Bible reads, "Then said Jesus unto his disciples, If any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me." Heavenly Father, once again, I just ask that you would meet with us this morning, and I pray that you would use your word to communicate to us what you want us to learn this morning, and I pray that you would do the speaking and not me, and no one cares about my opinion or what I have to say, and I just ask that you would guide my every thought and guide my words, and just help that we pay attention this morning, and that we all get something out of this morning's service. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right, you may be seated. All right, so, yesterday, as Donald said, we got a little late notice on that Brother Haley was not going to be here this morning, and then he asked if we would be able to handle the morning service. So it's always a pleasure to pull together a sermon, and I think like you did, I read a little bit last night, but then most of it I just got up this morning and asked God that he would multiply my time. And that's what was my prayer on Wednesday night, that God would multiply our time so that we'd be able to serve him better. And I feel like I got 2 or 3 hours worth of work done in 1 hour this morning. So that was great. So, this morning I just wanted to speak to all of us, myself included, and mostly myself. I think that a good way to preach or to teach is to think about what you need to hear yourself. And so I need to hear this morning. And so I'm preaching to myself, and you guys can just follow along, and hopefully we all get something out of this morning. So, Jesus, he was in Matthew 16:24 talking about following him, and how that we would have to deny ourselves, take up his cross, and follow him. And so I just want to talk about following. And I know we've hit on this a lot because we're getting a pastor, and the kind of the theme of the last couple of weeks has been all about that transition and following. And I think, in fact, Brother Houston, he preached a great sermon months and months ago about what fellowship looks like. And so it's kind of that was a sermon. That was before we had the camera, so that's not on YouTube. But it's a great sermon about that most pastors won't preach to their congregations, or that they would not feel comfortable telling people how to follow them a certain way. And he had a nice, enumerated outline, which I don't have this morning. Thank you, Donald, for your 3 Ps of this morning. That was great. But I just want to talk about following Christ this morning, because he is the head of our church. Pastor Haley will not be the head of our church. He will be our shepherd, but he is underneath Christ. And so that leads us right into 1 Corinthians 11:1. You can turn there if you want to, but I think it's a very familiar verse for us. It says, "Be followers of me, even as I also am of Christ." And so, we're commanded to follow our leaders as they follow Christ. The minute that they stop following Christ, we don't follow them anymore. But, Pastor Haley, he will be our pastor. He is our pastor. And so we're to follow him as he is following Christ. And this theme of following the Lord not following man, this is not new to the New Testament. This is something that, we're going to, I wrote down, this is a New Testament introduction with an Old Testament application. So that's a patented phrase, so anyone can use it. But, this theme of following the Lord is throughout the Bible. And let's turn to Hebrews 13, verse 7. Hebrews 13:7 says, "Remember them which have the rule over you, who have spoken unto you the word of God, whose faith follow, considering the end of their conversation." So those who have the rule over you, that's those who have responsibility over you, those who are leaders above you. I think we all agree that pastors should not rule as a dictator when we think of someone ruling over you, but that the pastor is responsible for this church. He's responsible for our actions, and as they speak the word of God to us on a weekly basis, 4 times a week, we're supposed to follow their faith. And it says, considering the end of their conversation. So what is the end of their conversation? It's to look at their behavior too. Because, as we say, talk is cheap, and it really is. Talk is really cheap. You can say anything, but it's like, what are you doing? And so, this is also a little bit of a mix. Being a great follower is also very similar to being a great leader. And you can't really be a follower until you can't be a leader until you've been a great follower. And so, Pastor Haley, I know, will lead by example. Pastor Holman led by example. And so we are to follow the end, consider the end of their conversation. That's where their speech stops and their lives begin. So, let's go back now to Joshua. Okay, so if you missed 2 or 3 Sunday nights ago, it was a great sermon. Moses is dead. Look it up on YouTube. Moses is dead. And it's really funny because we had talked to Brother Haley about, you're talking about yourself. And he's like, I wasn't going to touch that with a 10-foot pole. But we were all thinking it, this transition of Joshua, transitioning from Moses to Joshua. Okay, and so that's what I want to talk about this morning. So let's go ahead and read in the same passage that he read the other Sunday night, Joshua chapter 1, and we'll read verses 1 through 9. All right, so verse 1 says, Now after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, it came to pass that the Lord spake unto Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' minister, saying, Moses my servant is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, thou and all this people, unto the land which I do give to them, even to the children of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot shall tread upon, that I have given unto you, as I said unto Moses, from the wilderness and this Lebanon, even unto the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites, and unto the great sea toward the going down of the sun, shall be your coast. There shall not any man be able to stand before thee all the days of thy life. As I was with Moses, so will I be with thee. I will not fail thee, nor forsake thee. Be strong and of good courage, for unto this people shalt thou divide for an inheritance the land, which I swear unto their fathers to give them. Only be thou strong and very courageous, that thou mayest observe to do according to all the law, which Moses my servant commanded thee. Turn not from it to the right hand or to the left, that thou mayest prosper whithersoever thou goest. This book of the law shall not depart out of thy mouth, but thou shalt meditate therein day and night, that thou mayest observe to do according to all that is written therein. For then thou shalt make thy way prosperous, and then thou shalt have good success. Have I not commanded thee? Be strong and of good courage. Be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed. For the Lord thy God is with thee whithersoever thou goest. So this is the instruction to Joshua. And if you read Deuteronomy 34, that's the chapter when this is the death of Moses. So this is the end. We're not talking about in our church that, we've had someone die and not, someone else is taking over. But, in a sense, though, this is just a transitional time in this congregation of Israel. And so we're experiencing that same kind of transition where, we had a great leader and now we're going to have another great leader. And Joshua went on to do amazing things. He carried out the promises that God had made. And so Joshua, the great leader, was a great follower. And so that's the example that I want to study this morning. And we're going to learn what Joshua did and how that applies to us. And those are the things that we need to be doing in our lives. And not only in the context of our church, but just in the context of life in general. We're all leaders of something. We have children, we have younger cousins, whatever, younger siblings. Caleb is probably not a leader, but he will be. He's probably the only one in this church, but, he's the youngest. But people, we are leaders of people, and so these are applicable to us. And then also, in the context of our church, we need to follow our pastor. And so Joshua followed Moses, but more importantly, he followed the Lord. So this is sort of the passing of the torch, okay? So let's look at how Joshua followed. Let's go back to Exodus 17. Exodus 17, this is how Joshua followed. So Exodus 17, 18, that doesn't make sense. Verse 18 through 16. I don't know how we're going to do that. I think that's supposed to be 8. So let's read 17, 8 through 16. It says, Then came Amalek and fought with Israel in Rephidim. And Moses said unto Joshua, Choose us out men and go, fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on the roof of the hill with the rod of God in thine hand. So Joshua did as Moses had said to him, and fought with Amalek. And Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. And it came to pass, when Moses held up his hand, that Israel prevailed. And when he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands were very weary. And they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat thereon. And Aaron and Hur stayed up his hands, the one on one side and the other on the other side. And his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. And Joshua discomfited Amalek and his people with the edge of his sword. And the Lord said unto Moses, Write this for memorial in a book, and rehearse it in the ears of Joshua, for I will utterly put out the remembrance of Amalek under the heaven. And Moses built an altar, and called the name Jehovah Nisi. For he said, Because the Lord has sworn that the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. So, notice that Joshua obeyed. Just a simple command. Hey, Joshua, get an army together and let's go. We're going to war. And so he did. So, there's going to be things that Pastor Haley will ask us to do. He might not tell us to do things. I don't think that's good leadership. But, there are things that will be asked of us, and it would behoove us to obey those things. So the next mention, this is the first mention of Joshua in the Bible. And so the next mention of him is in Exodus 24. So let's just turn a few more pages to the right. Exodus 24. Now let's look at verse 12 through 18. And the Lord said unto Moses, Come up to me into the mount, and be there, and I will give thee tables of stone, and a law and commandments which I have written, that thou mayest teach them. And Moses rose up, and his minister Joshua. And Moses went up into the mount of God. And he said unto the elders, Tarry ye here for us, until we, this is Moses speaking, until me and Joshua, come again unto you. And behold, Aaron and Hur are with you. If any man have any matters to do, let him come unto them. And Moses went up to the mount, and a cloud covered the mount. And the glory of the Lord the glory of the Lord abode upon Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered it 6 days. And on the seventh day he called unto Moses out of the midst of out of the cloud. And the sight of the glory of the Lord was like a devouring fire on top of the mount in the eyes of the children of Israel. And Moses went up into the midst of the cloud, and gat him up into the mount. And Moses was in the mount for 40 days and 40 nights. So, this is the time, if you remember, that the children of Israel disobeyed. Or is that already? No. Well, so Moses went to go see the Lord, and who went with him? Joshua. Okay, Joshua was his minister. And so I think it's important for us to minister to our leaders. Okay, that's it's a good thing that we should have. At work we should obey our bosses, and we should minister unto them. It's not something that's like we do grudgingly, or that we don't want to do it, but it's something that we should just do. We should serve those who are serving us. We serve our leaders. And so this is what Joshua did. All right, so then the next mention is Exodus 32. So let's keep going through Exodus. Look at 32:17. It says that when Joshua heard the noise of the people as they shouted, he said unto Moses, There is a noise of war in the camp. Yeah, so this is right. This is when the children of Israel, sorry, I didn't read all my context this morning. So while they're gone, this is when the children of Israel make golden calves and they start worshiping the gods that they had learned about in Egypt. And, Moses, he didn't obviously do that, and neither did Joshua. So Joshua, he was not there when the children were rebelling. So he was faithful to the Lord, and he's the only one of Israel besides Moses who was faithful to the Lord. And then let's look at Exodus 33:11. That says, "And the Lord spake unto Moses face to face, as a man speaketh unto his friend. And he turned again into the camp, but his servant Joshua, the son of Nun, a young man, departed not out of the tabernacle." So Joshua was someone who wanted to be near the presence of the Lord. And in this time, the presence of the Lord was in the tabernacle, and Joshua didn't want to leave it. So, Joshua, this is how he followed. He served Moses, and he wanted to serve the Lord and be in the presence of the Lord. So now, the next time, let's go to Numbers. Just going to keep cruising through the Bible. Numbers chapter 11. Numbers 11:25 through 30. It says, "And the Lord came down in a cloud, and spake unto him, and took of the Spirit that was upon him, and gave it unto the 70 elders. And it came to pass that when the Spirit rested upon them, they prophesied, and did not cease. But there remained 2 of the men in the camp. The name was one of Eldad, and the name of the other was Medad. And the Spirit rested upon them, and they were of them that were written, but went not out into the tabernacle. And they prophesied in the camp. And there ran a young man, and told Moses, and said, Eldad and Medad do prophesy in the camp. And Joshua, the son of Nun, the servant of Moses, one of his young men, answered and said, My lord Moses, forbid them. And Moses said unto them, Enviest thou for my sake? Would God that all the Lord's people were prophets, and that the Lord would put his Spirit upon them. And Moses gat him into the camp, he and the elders of Israel." So, one of the characteristics of being a good follower is making mistakes. And here we have Joshua questioning what was going on. And so, but ultimately, he wasn't a rebellious person, but he asked Moses, like, hey, forbid them. And Moses said, no, would God that all of the Lord's people would be prophets. And so, that's part of getting character, is that when you follow, it's okay to make mistakes. And, of course, leaders make mistakes too. Moses made a mistake, and he wasn't able to see the promised land. But, what was I going to say? Oh, okay. Yeah, and in verse 28 it says, that he said that to forbid them, but, they're not quite ready for his personal opinion. Okay, Moses didn't want his personal opinion. He just wanted him to follow, okay? So if God is working, this is the statement I like to make. If God is working, let him work. So it's not up to us to question our leaders. There are things that, as this church ministry grows, I'm sure that, I would hope that we'd all do things in one accord, but there's going to be multiple opinions on how things should progress. But as the pastor, he has the ultimate responsibility because he has the rule over us. He has the responsibility for our church. And so we should learn from Joshua's example here, where he had an opinion, he expressed it, but we're not ready for his personal opinion. He should have just followed Moses. Okay, so next is Numbers 13. So this is a time when Joshua is also asked to serve a purpose. So this would have been a ministry that he was put in charge of, or not in charge of, but he was a part of a particular ministry, if you will, of Israel, and he was used as a spy. So in Numbers 13, verse 16, it says here that's the verse that just talks that he was asked to be a part of this, the group of spies. And so in verse 25, it says, And they returned from searching the land after 40 days. So he was used as to serve, okay? So, when they went, they were asked to go into the land of Canaan to go and have a report, make a report. And they went and they saw, and as most of us know, Caleb and Joshua were the only two who believed the Lord. The others said, "Oh, we can't go in. We can't win. We can't fight these guys." But they wanted to go in. So look in Numbers 14. Verse 1, it says, "And the congregation lifted up their voice and cried, and the people wept that night." And they're weeping because the spies came back and they told everyone, "Hey, it's really scary. There's giants there. They have cities with walls. We're not going to be able to win." They doubted that the Lord would provide for them. This is the same God that just put them through the Red Sea, that fed them, that gave them water, and they're doubting him. And so the people, they were crying and they wept that night. And all the children of Israel murmured against Moses and against Aaron. And the whole congregation said to them, "Would God that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would God we had died in this wilderness? And wherefore hath the Lord brought us unto this land, to fall by the sword, that our wives and our children should be a prey? Were it not better for us to return to Egypt?" So now they're just so scared, and they think they're just going to go to battle and that God's not going to let them prevail. They'd rather just, should we just go back to Egypt? And they said one to another, "Let us make a captain and let us return to Egypt." Then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before all the assembly of the congregation of the children of Israel. And Joshua, the son of Nun, and Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, that's not right, but which were of them that searched the land, they rent their clothes. So they were so upset at the lack of faith that the people had that, Moses and Aaron, they fell on their faces, and Caleb and Joshua, they ripped their clothes. And so, he had passion, but he believed God, and he believed that the Lord would give them the victory. And it just upset him so much that the people didn't have that same faith that he had. So, Moses, he was a great leader, and Joshua was just simply following him. So, let's go to Numbers 27. So there's a couple other instances where Joshua is mentioned, but here is the point of time where Joshua is going to succeed Moses. So in between where we were at and here, the people lacked faith, and they doubted that God would provide for them. And so God wanted to just be done with Israel and wanted to kill them. Moses begged the Lord to not do that. And so the Lord said that he would let everyone who is 20 years and under into the promised land. Everyone who was over that age, they wouldn't get to see it, except for two guys, Caleb and Joshua. We know that Joshua was a young man, but he was at least over 20 years old, because the Bible points out that he was going to be able to go into the promised land. And so, all of the men of Israel passed away. And I think, I don't know if the women, I think some of the women were still alive, but these men who did not have the faith to believe that God would prevail, they were not able to see the promised land. So here's kind of this is not the changing of the guard, but this is the promise that he will be the leader. Numbers 27, 15 through 23. It says, "And Moses spake unto the Lord, saying, Let the Lord, the God of the spirits of all flesh, set a man over the congregation, which may go out before them, which may go in before them, and which may lead them out, and which may bring them in, and that the congregation of the Lord be not as sheep which have no shepherd. And the Lord said unto Moses, Take thee Joshua the son of Nun, a man in whom is the Spirit, and lay thine hand upon him, and set him before Eleazar the priest, and before all the congregation, give him a charge in their sight. And thou shalt put some of thine honor upon him, that all the congregation of the children of Israel may be obedient. And he shall stand before Eleazar the priest, who shall ask counsel for him after the judgment of Urim before the Lord. At his word shall they go out, and at his word shall they shall come in, both he and all the children of Israel with him, even all the congregation. And Moses did as the Lord commanded him, and he took Joshua and set him before Eleazar the priest and before all the congregation. And he laid his hands upon him and gave him a charge as the Lord commanded by the hand of Moses. So we know that when Moses is going to pass, which Moses is getting elderly at this point, that Joshua will be the next leader. So he's been a great follower, and he still is a follower, but he's going to be a leader, okay? So now here's kind of the key verse for Joshua's life, Numbers 32, 11 through 12. Numbers 32, 11 through 12. So just like Paul said, be ye followers of me, even as I am followers of Christ. Was Joshua following Moses, or was he following someone else? Verse 11 says, surely none of the men that came up out of Egypt from 20 years old and upward shall see the land which I swear unto Abraham, unto Isaac, and unto Jacob, because they have not wholly followed me. This is God speaking. Save Caleb, the son of and Joshua, for they have fully followed the Lord. So that's the key to success as a follower. Follow the Lord. I'll just read that again. 1 Corinthians 11:1. Be followers of me, even as I am followers of Christ. So we want a leader that follows Christ. And as a follower, you need to follow Christ as well. We're not following the leader. We are, but we're following him as he follows Christ. So, now we come to the end of Moses' tenure, the end of his life. And like all great leaders, they have kind of their final instructions. And so keep turning to Deuteronomy chapter 1. Look at verse 38. Verse 138 says, but Joshua the son of Nun, which standeth before thee, he shall go in thither, encourage him, for he shall cause Israel to inherit it. So Moses' command, his final command as leader, was to encourage the new leader. And let's look at Deuteronomy 3, verse 28. It says, but charge Joshua, and again, encourage him, and strengthen him, for he shall go over before this people, and he shall cause them to inherit the land which thou shalt see. And then in Deuteronomy 31, verse 7, it says, and Moses called unto Joshua, and said unto him in the sight of all Israel, be strong and of a good courage, for thou must go with this people unto the land which the Lord hath sworn unto their fathers to give them, and thou shalt cause them to inherit it. And then lastly, let's look at Deuteronomy 31:23. It says, and he gave Joshua the son of Nun a charge, and said, be strong and of good courage, for thou shalt bring the children of Israel into the land which I swear unto them, and I will be with thee. And so I feel like this is the kind of what we need to do for Brother Haley, is to encourage him. We don't have a current leader who's passing the torch, who is going to be the encouragement for him. And I think that we need to be the encouragement for our next leader, for Brother Haley, Pastor Haley. So, and then let's look at the end of Deuteronomy, chapter 34, 9 through 12. So this is after Moses has died. Verse 9, it says, and Joshua the son of Nun was full of the spirit of wisdom, for Moses had laid his hands upon him, and the children of Israel hearkened unto him, and did as the Lord commanded Moses. And there arose not a prophet since in Israel like unto Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face, in all the signs and wonders which the Lord sent him to do in the land of Egypt to Pharaoh, and to all his servants, and to his land, and in all that mighty hand, and in all that great terror which Moses showed in the sight of Israel. So, just as Israel accepted Joshua, I know that we will accept Pastor Haley, but we just need to be reminded that we need to hearken unto him and do as the Lord commanded Moses, as the passing of the torch from Pastor Holman to Pastor Haley. I think it's important for us to hearken unto him and to encourage him and just be good, faithful church members and do what we learned about in Sunday school. There's a lot of work to be done in Wichita. There's a lot of souls that need to be saved. We need to build this church. I mean, God will build the church, but we need to be his workers. And we're not talking about the building, obviously. We're talking about the people. And like I said Wednesday, I'm excited. This is a great time in our church's history where we're going to have some more highlights. So I look forward to that, and I pray that we're able to be used of God in mighty ways. So let's go ahead and go to the Lord in prayer, and then we're going to have a closing song. Andrea's picked one out. All right, Heavenly Father, thank you so much for